Thank you all. We can do a bar lightning talk on farming and permaculture later if we like. Appreciate being here. This is, I was at the first RailsConf. I've been at about half of them, and this is the fifth time I've had the privilege to speak. So it's one of these things that you don't think about how long you've been doing this stuff, and then you look back. And so some of you may know me from writing the RailsView book as well. That's now almost 13 years old, so probably needs an update. So today we're going to go over a whole lot in 30 minutes. So here's our roadmap. We'll talk about the why, we'll talk about the UX side of things, we'll talk about some visual design things, and then we're gonna put it all together and do everybody's most dreaded thing of a live attempt. So first with the why. For decades we've worked in silos. Product decided what to build, engineering made it work, and design made it pretty. But 3 separate circles, 3 separate languages of how we communicate, 3 separate processes. But now, in recent times, this is starting to change. Silos are blending and merging. New AI tooling is changing our expectations of what we can output. AI now can generate design, it can critique interfaces, it can help with user research. It allows product managers and designers to prototype in real code. And we are the one-person framework, right? So to that end, we're all becoming more multidisciplinary. Rails developers who can understand UX, designers who can code, product managers who understand technical constraints. Well, maybe that last one's a bit of a stretch, but we'll keep going. The convergence is happening whether we're practicing it or not. So this doesn't mean that we have to become this unicorn, the mythical unicorn where you can do all the things, but we want to be better at collaboration. So if you think about what is user experience, this is a great map of the disciplines of user experience. And as you can see, we even have software development down here in the corner. But we can't possibly be full stack and do all these things well. What we can be is very, very well-developed T-based individuals with multiple descenders. But whenever I start talking about, hey, developers should design, designers should code, things of that nature, right? What I hear back from most of my friends in the development space is, I can't design. I can't push those pixels around in Figma. And we usually think about design as the visual design side of things. And that is a big part of it, but as Jobs said, design is not just what it looks like and feels like. Design is how it works. And this, friends, is where we have an inordinate ability to affect outcomes. We commit code changes. We push to production. We fix the missing edge cases when that bug comes in. So we are actually the gatekeepers of what happens in our product. And that is something where we need to identify designs and push things out and improve them. But one of the main issues we have is that we have our mental model in the developer experience world that is totally different from what we're trying to ship. We're thinking models, views, and controllers. We're architecting around how these things interact. But the user has no idea about this. So they just want to share something with their friends. They want to know, where do I write? How do I know people are actually going to see it? Did I publish it or not? These are all features that we have to work through. But from a flow perspective, we often end up with disconnected. And this has gotten better in the last 20 years, but we still have a lot of apps where things are, you have to go over to this area, fill out this form, then you can come back and add this thing because this select wasn't populated. So we have a disconnect. 7 RESTful actions makes a lot of sense. It's pretty easy to work with. We've been doing it for a while, but the user doesn't think I need to hit post pound new, right? They just say, I want to tell people about my weekend. So if we think about more complex things in modeling, we're not sitting there and saying, oh, well, these relationships tie things together to the user. They don't get, this is my stuff. Now, how we has many belongs to, all those things, that's secondary. In their mind, it's just my stuff. So we have to start thinking about things from flow. So we need to stop optimizing for how the system works, per se, and start optimizing for how the user wants to work. And this is where the overlapping circles become powerful. When we can understand both the technical architecture and the user mental model, you bridge a gap that pure design and pure engineer can't do. But this feels a little muddy and intimidating. You got this big gray blob in the middle. Is that really what I'm going to do? And a more realistic look at this is the multidisciplinary advantage. You are an engineer who happens to understand the language of product, the language of business, the language of design. You can affect some of these things, but you're not necessarily the only person doing it. So with that in mind, we're going to think about things, and I'm going to give you some UX tips to do, and then some visual design things that we can do immediately in your individual products or working on a large team. So experience design. We want to get the core right here, right? So what do we work on is always that first question. And Jesse James Garrett, who was one of the founders of Adaptive Path, said it really well, right? This is the most essential task for any designer. And I would argue anybody working in product. If we are solving the wrong problems, our products fail. So we want to sit there and say, hey, let's get this right. Let's make these decisions up front right. We all want to be in the room. It shouldn't just be product coming and saying, here's your PRD, peace out. It shouldn't be the designers going off to the mountain and coming back with some beautiful mock-ups that don't really understand the flow or the problem space, right? So how do we get into that problem space? This is called a journey map. This is about the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C. The orange is the visit to the building itself. Everything else around it, though, is how people hear about it, learn about it, talk about it, share it to their friends when they get back. What are the things that they want to look up? And all of these have touch points. Some of them are software, some of them are not. But when we go and look at this whole journey map of from the minute they hear about our product to the minute they leave it or experience or how it exits out, we can start to identify, oh, hey, you know, we got this onboarding thing that happens here. That's something we can play with. We've got this kind of weird thing that happens when somebody orders something and this return happens. That's something we want to look at. So we can start pulling those things out as, you know, high-level tasks. And then we can start saying, all right, well, where do we want our time, right? We've got X hours in the day. We've got X budget to burn. What do we do here to make the biggest impact? And we only want to work on the top 2 quadrants. The upper right is where it's going to be hard. But we might think differently. We might change the paradigm, and we could win there. The upper left is where we have a whole lot of things we can win on because users hate it, what's out there, and it's a high need for them. So finding out, you know, sometimes we like to just get in there and like, hey, I know I can ship some stuff. I closed a whole bunch of bugs. Tuesday was awesome. But the reality is that that may not have much benefit to the end user. So thinking about these things is very important to identify the job to be done, the project that we're going to go after. And then once we've identified those jobs to be done, we want to go through and break those things down into flows. Should be pretty common here. This is a login flow, right? We do this all the time. This probably is the lowest priority thing to fix unless you have onboarding or onboarding issues. But giving you an idea of like this helps us identify all the different touch points. And you can actually merge this into some wireframes too. So instead of having to just say, this is a page that's a square, hey, I'm going to do a quick little scribble of what that stuff is on that page. Man, we got a picture, we got some words, maybe I got a map here. Oh, I've got a list of items that's a nav, right? We start to talk about a little bit about what this flow is, what my design's going to be. Another thing, this has now been around for 31 years. So 1994, Jacob Nielsen published it. It's usability heuristics, and they apply to almost any human-computer interaction you can think of. And if your app is messed up in any of these, that's a great place to start. And they're pretty simple. They're also pretty broad. So this can be something where you want to go read about what each one of these means. We could do a whole workshop just on these things, these 10 items. But let's take visibility of system status. So that's not just a red or green light in the upper corner saying we're up or there's a problem, right? It's not status.github, although that's an important part of it. Am I breaking this or is this broken? That's one part. But is this thing here? Why am I here? What's happening? Where am I? All of these things kind of go hand in hand, and that helps the user understand what they're doing. All of this stuff in UX comes out of HCI. It comes out of the early work that was done at Xerox PARC and all of that era. And so it's all evolutionary out of those things. It's not just pretty pixels. A lot of times we want to ask why. Whenever we're trying to debug something, this is failing, why? Person drops off here, why? And there's famously the 5 whys, which was popularized by the Toyota production system, Taiichi Ohno, in the 1930s, 40s is where it originates, and he popularizes this in the 60s. But the 5 is an arbitrary number. It's asking why until you actually get to a root cause. And there are other techniques, such as fishbone diagrams, that comes out of Kawasaki in the 60s as well. But trying to understand the reason this problem exists, actually, because other times you're often just putting lipstick on the pig. You're just band-aiding over something instead of finding out why this thing is actually going down. Another one to do that's going to be a lot of fun is the squint test, right? So this helps you with visual hierarchy issues. Dear God, sea of red. Squint at this. Squint so you can't really see it. What do you see? You see an explosion of red. What's the most important thing on this page, besides that they want you to spend money? Who knows? Everything is the same. So like in The Incredibles, when everybody's super, nobody is, same thing here. All of these elements want to be super, and they're all, you've made it so loud that one, I kind of need to close the tab, and two, I don't know where to go. If I'm looking for my login, I'm going to hope it's in the upper right-hand corner, based on convention, which thankfully it is. But I don't know what else to do because there's so much noise here. Here's a B2B example. This I did a decade and a half ago when I was helping Procore spin up. And this is a change order. So change orders in construction, really important because the original design didn't work quite right. This is where Chip Gaines calls up on the phone and says, yeah, I took out your wall and I need another $15,000. So what's the most important information here? We've taken it and put it in a very dark, high contrast block, and it's going to answer two questions. How much does this delay my schedule, and how much more money is this going to cost? From there, everything else is secondary, and you can work around, but your eye immediately is going to do figure ground and jump to that. And we'll see another example with just type of figure ground and how your eye jumps to something like that. I encourage everyone to sketch, and this can be on a whiteboard. This can be what I do a lot. I went to architecture school, so I use trace paper because you can overlay really quickly, stack up pages and stuff. Or you can do it in a Moleskine notebook or just a piece of paper. And here we're talking, it's all boxes and arrows and scribbly lines. So this is something that is really easy for everybody involved to do. Product, engineering, and design can all sit there and scribble out potential futures of this page or this flow. And you can get down into the nitty-gritty too, right? So this is a minor interaction. This is one little row of how I'm returning a PDF document. And so different states of that. We don't have to sit here and do crazy high-fidelity mocks all the time. We can do a lot of sketching and really go right into code, especially once we've established some of the things we're going to talk about in the next section. Another one that we're going to do here at the end here is called a six-up, and a six-up is 6 different ideas that could be for this page, and what you do is you do it really quickly. So, hey, 2 minutes, everybody sketch 6 ideas. And we present to each other, and then everybody starts to do it again. We do it like 2-3 times, and you'll see the whole room gravitates towards one solution, or maybe 2 or 3 solutions. But really quickly, you start pulling ideas from each other. It's a very fun collaborative exercise. Everyone's favorite, though, is research, right? 2 ways to do this when we don't have a research budget. One is shadow your users, and you can do this in person. You can do this with software now. You can actually watch, you can have like Microsoft Clarity is a free version that will actually record the session, and you can watch the mouse clicks happen. And you can actually get rid of PII as well, so you don't have to worry about credit card information, things of that nature. Or if you have the opportunity, if you're doing internal tools, go sit and watch somebody use it. Because no matter what you do asking a question, when you watch them use it, you're immediately going to see all sorts of problems. Like they won't sit there and say, oh, well, yeah, this thing is weird and I have to enter it in this way. You're going to say, why does it take you 15 minutes to close this support case? Oh, you know, you're already off the phone with the person, but because you have double entry here, you've got to do this here. You've got to go way out of your flow. Okay, we can catch all these things and start fixing them, right? And let's talk about the reality here that AI is a game changer and a force multiplier for a lot of these things. We can get ideas, we can help jumpstart conversations. So here's some techniques that we can use in with Claude or something like that, right? So persona generation. I need to talk about what are my different kinds of users? What are, who's going to be using this product? A usability audit. We can now upload artifacts into these things and they can do analysis on them. It's not great, but a lot of these things can just get your mind flowing. Be like, oh, I didn't think about that, huh? Let's try that one. And then journey mapping, which we saw earlier, like, a lot of times with these things, we are very good about the software and what we're doing in it, but we don't always necessarily understand where this software hits, where people are using it, how it interacts with their daily life. Kelly Godo is a researcher out of San Francisco, and she does amazing stuff where they actually follow people around with video cameras and film them and turn that into a story. And it's really deep research. If you have that budget, definitely give her a call. But it's the kind of stuff that you can kind of start to imagine and work out. And that'll help improve your product. And now let's just be honest here. There is the taste aspect, right? So for those of you who don't know who this is Rick Rubin. He's a famous music producer, and he caught a little flack recently for saying that he's not a musician. He just has good taste. But it's also that he knows how to manage creatives, let's be honest, because you can't get a record out the door without managing disparate personalities. But there is a taste aspect to this, but that's the visual design, pretty, branding, all of that kind of stuff. User experience is more science. And so that way, and to that end, there is effectively manuals of practice. There's things we can do. And so it's like, great, where's that manual, right? Because I would read it if you could find it. And what I would say is that this is the missing manual of practice. I've used this book for over a decade now. They just released the second version. This is from Leah Bewley, and Joe Natoli joined her for the second edition. What's so great about this book is it has a whole bunch of different techniques, and it talks about what's a card sort? Why do you use a card sort? What are your expectations to come out of it? What are the pros and cons of using this? And it has all these different basic UX techniques that help you work with how do I make information better? How do I make flows better? And so you can actually sit there and try these things out at home on your own projects, or maybe at work a little bit and see if this works out for you. Like, hey, we're hitting this wall. What from this book would help us? So this is a great thing to play with, especially as far as not going and buying a 30-book library and trying to ingest all of UX. All right, so visual design fundamentals. Get through this pretty quick so we can jump into the scribbling, which is always the fun part. So type, white space, color. Starting with type, the good news is type is 95% of what you need to do, which is what everybody does. Right? So if you think about the hierarchy here, how many of you actually followed the way it said you would? Probably about half at least. Yeah, some people are like, no, man, I read it from the top. I'm like, okay, that's fine. But this is what we talk about when we talk about, this is the squint testing, right? Your brain goes to a high contrast large thing. That's how we're wired. And then you can work your way around to see the secondary information. So this is a type scale, right? And so we're going to do the same thing. We're actually going to define a type scale for our application. We want to use the minimum number of type, font size combinations, and weight. What will happen with an app, invariably, is you get people building this stuff by hand, and so you just start to get a whole lot of drift. And over time, you end up with like 30, 40 different type declarations. The consistency actually hurts if you don't have it. So looking at setting something up like this is super important. On key value pairs, we echo a lot of key value pairs, right? That's 90% of what we end up doing, right? But what's the hierarchy here? Hierarchy's all wrong. Is the information important or is the key important? I don't care about the key. I care about the value. Okay, cool. Let's flip the bold. You know what? The key is really, really secondary. Let's make it smaller. Okay, now I'm starting to see something. That becomes much more legible, much more scannable. But how about we start talking about, can I make this a sentence? How do I talk about this? Do I actually say first name John, last name Athayde? No, usually they don't. Hi, I'm John Athayde. And then, now we can sit there, that's all just the same font size there. So, okay, that's all right. But now if I bold a couple items, those jump out. I make the name bigger. And this is one of those things where you can try different fonts and different styles, and they have different feels, right? So a quick win in your app is going to be start with a 3-level type scale and work your way up from that. So H1, H2P. And your LIs are going to be the same as your P tag, right? So start with that and then work your way up from there. White space, most underused thing in software. We have a lot of managers who'll be like, hey, you've got extra space on there. You can put another thing there. And the answer should be no. Here's an example from the Rails guys that I worked on with the docs team. So on the left is if there is no padding and margin on any of those elements. Pretty crammed together. Hard to see where the paragraph breaks are. Just spacing out lines, putting some margin and padding in there, immediately you start to make this a lot more scannable, a lot easier to hit to. And we have the same type scale here, right? The only change here is I went star, margin padding 0 when I was making up this slide. So that's kind of something to think about. Is just margin and padding can give you that much flexibility. And this is a great tool. We'll see if this will play. Yes, it will. So this is up on GitHub, and you can go around and play with it. And what's really fun is you can start moving, when you variabilize these things, and you take them up to CSS variables or to Sass variables, now you can change them globally. And you can start to see what adjusting different things has as far as a change. So this is, and you can randomize it and do all sorts of fun stuff with it. But this, you can change the fonts and all sorts of, headlines and different sizing, button sizing like we're seeing right there. So this gives you an idea of some of the things that can become variables. And if you tool these out to variables and echo them throughout your CSS, they become far cleaner. So dark mode too, right? So quick white space win, turn these things into variables and give your UI some breathing room. Color. So color palette inspiration is always one of the hardest things. I hate doing it, and I've been doing design since I was in high school. So I love this site, this account, Alex Christash. He's over in Europe, and he just publishes. He's got almost 200 color palettes that are free for brand and product use. So I went through. I had a friend that needed an update to her podcast site. So there's his thing. There's the design on the right. So you can start to see how I've pulled certain things in and started using them in the design. Now, famously, there's a 60-30-10 rule. What is the 60-30-10 rule? It means that most of your backgrounds, most of your stuff is going to be these light neutrals. They're going to give you enough definition to move things and separate things, but they're really this gray, light, off, not much of a color palette. 30% is kind of more of your like highlights, your brand stuff, and then you're going to have an accent color. And that's success states, warnings, things of that nature. We want to use this to help balance out our pages so they don't become explosions of color, because very easily in product, it can get a little noisy. Consumer product design has all sorts of, people bend this in all sorts of ways. But most of what I've been working on for the last 2 years and 20 years is B2B stuff, and this pretty much holds true. Want to follow standards. Don't make your success message red and your fail message green. I mean, that should be pretty self-evident, but these colors have been established and are under. So when there's a standard, just stick with it. Now, something to think about with red and green specifically. This is a product, Color Oracle. You can download for Mac, Linux, or Windows, so you have no excuse. And this actually runs, and you can change your whole screen. So if I'm looking here in Figma and I want to apply and check out one of the modes, it has 3 different modes. So here's what it changes to. This is what a colorblind person might see. So we can see how much difference happens, and we lose so much definition between the red and the green. You can see it mostly up in the top with the photograph and the header bar, just disappears entirely. So why does that matter? If we're using spotlight colors in an app, we need to show meaning with shape, not just with color. So those are the 2 things for color wins that you can do really quickly. Pick an accent color and try and clean up your app if you have a lot of color drift, and then always pair meaning with a non-color indicator. So if you've got a red circle and a green circle, put an X and a check in it, something like that, right? All right, some quick AI techniques: color palette generation, typography pairing, design critiques. These will all get you something, and we'll see really quick here in a second. So more AI tricks and tips. There we go. This is a book that Patrick Neiman wrote, and it came out last year, and it's got a whole bunch of ideas. So if you want to play with this, go ahead and pick it up. You can get it from Amazon or a PDF version of it as well. And it's got a whole lot of examples of, hey, this is how this works. And they have a Slack community too, where people are experimenting and trying all sorts of stuff. So a lot of fun. In the same way we're doing all sorts of crazy stuff on Claude with development and experimenting there. The same thing is happening in design and product. So definitely figure it out. So, all right, we're going to do something live, and we'll see how much I fall on my face. So if you went through the new Rails tutorial that Chris Oliver finished recently, you build an e-commerce store, right? And so let's start real quick and say, okay, hey, Claude, I want a color palette. What does it do? Well, what's fascinating is that it comes back with a color palette that's pretty close to the Ruby on Rails palette, but it's not quite. It got red, but it got the wrong red. So it's, again, fine. It's a fun thing to play with and try, right? But so we get the 60-30-10 rule here, and that's what that comes out at with, we're going to have darks and lights and then a little bit of red accent. So we're going to switch over here to the iPad and see how this goes. All right. Fingers crossed. So first things first, we want to do research, right? So when I'm doing visual design research, there's 2 great places. One is Baymard Institute. Baymard Institute's been around for 20 years. We started using them in 2004 when I was a creative director because they had really, really good e-commerce research, like tested research and checklists for UX. The other is mobbin.com, which documents every couple of weeks they're posting new onboarding flows or new app flows and things like that, so you can see what other people are actually doing. This is really helpful in getting kind of an idea of how the visual design world is currently, what the current trends in visual design is. Baymard is very much about the UX side of things. So these 2 together are really helpful. So when you start up, if you've gone through and built this is what you end up with, right? Pretty boring, pretty straightforward, kind of vanilla Rails experience. We've got our login screen, we've got a products before and after, a products index up top, before and after login. We've got, product create down at the bottom, we've got product show at the bottom right. So kind of a mess. And there's one thing we do at the very end of the tutorial where we add a little bit of HTML and CSS. Nothing fancy, but just a little bit of cleanup here gets us to this. Still nothing crazy, nothing to write home about, but we've got a little more visual hierarchy happening, and things are a little bit better. So what we're going to do is a 6-up. What are some ways that this page could be laid out better? Let's see here. So if I'm going to start here, this is the kind of stuff I encourage you all to do. I'm going to put this down so I can actually draw better. So, you know, we're going to want some kind of header nav, right? We're probably going to have a big footer block down here at the bottom. What we have right now, we have this image, and then we've got a headline. That's our title. You know, we want to have maybe a little bit of detail. We want a price point, and we want a button. Buy now. Add to cart. Add to your list. Lots of ways this could evolve. We can do another one where we're going to go, and the same thing, big bar at the bottom, little bar at the top. Let's reverse it. So I got that, you know, now I got a title. Okay, cool. Maybe we'd have some graphics under here too. Let's say we're a big lifestyle brand instead. You know, we have all these great photos, we got some cool stuff, so we're going to have on every product page, we're going to have a really big, cool header image. Then we're going to have our product title. Then we're going to have something else. You know, we'll have some other photographs kind of happening down here. We'll have some details. Again, buy now. Some other options. You can kind of keep going through and doing this, but the point is that you want to say, hey, you know, I'm going to make a circle. We're going to have all our features be circles. Whoops. No, Siri. You know, and you start adding those things in, right? So it's, you know, and you can do as many of these as you want. This is the goal, is to do these, you know, I'm going really fast, and that's intentional. I don't want to spend time making this perfect. I want to get as many potential ideas on paper as possible. Then I'd sit there and we'd all talk about them, and we'd go back and do it again. And we're going to start gravitating towards something, right? And so I'm running a little short on time here, so I can show you, like, here's what I did last night. Same idea, right? But you can start to see the different kinds of layouts that come out of that, right? So now we know we have our logo. We've got some colors that came across with it. So let's say we're just going to do something relatively straightforward. We're going to kind of work on our final here. So I've got my Rails logo. You know, we're going to do some kind of like bar at the top. We'll do, you know, a light gray up here. Down at the bottom, you know, I want to have, you know, this will be like my Zillow nav that has like everything ever known to man listed. And we're going to use the darker gray down here because we have that, you know, those kind of darker grays as part of our palette. Oops. Oops, still light. Try that again. There we go. And now let's go back. We'll say photo time. What are we going to do? We're going to have our big picture here. And we'll add some other ones here, here, and here. We'll have some breadcrumbs, right? Navigation. We want to be able to know where we are in the system and how we can get back out. That's always important. Big title, probably is going to be multiple lines. It may be really short, but we want to plan for the worst case scenario in our titling. Then we're going to say maybe, you know, publisher, author, and then we'll say price point, so $1 million, and buy now. And, you know, with the buy now button, right, that's going to be where we're going to have our color flare come in. Oops, here we go. So right there, boom. And there's our Rails logo, we'll make that red. So this is a really quick and dirty idea of a wireframe. What's great with this is now I can immediately go and build this in code. I could build this in Figma. I could do whatever I want. The point being that we don't have to only use and wait for high fidelity mocks. All of this is something you all should and can do. And so this is the UX part of design, because this is the flow. If that's 10 pixels to the left or the right, not the end of the world. But how I get to this page, how I work through these flows, what happens with session, how do I onboard? How do I add to my cart? What happens if I've added to my cart and I leave, I come back? These are the things that we make the decisions on. We code these things. These are the things that you want to affect. And so I actually was working on this morning. Let's see if it came in. It did not come in. But there, I'll post the final of this in the shared version, but I did a mock-up of it, of what this could be. So you can basically work these things, work these techniques, and apply them across everything you're doing. And this is not something, again, that has to be hard. This is the faster you do it, the more scribbling you do, the more collaborative this becomes, the more wins you're going to see from it. So when you think about these UX things, go back and review. Look at your ways to do your squint test, your flows. Check out your journey maps. Think of the holistic picture. Look at your type. Look at your color. Look at your padding. That's going to give you huge wins right out of the gate. And so if you want to get in touch with me, I'd love to talk with you. I think we're out of time for questions, but I'll be around all day and this evening too. Also, developerux.com. If you're really interested in the type thing, there's a talk I did at RailsConf remote, which is about an hour. That's a type from 2020-21. And then there's a version of that that's been turned into a 3-hour course. And if you would like, there's 40% off with RailsConf 25 right now. And then you can find me on Twitter, Blue Sky, Mastodon, Ruby Social, LinkedIn, etc. So thank you very much. I appreciate your time.